Right, Supratim, thanks very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Simon. Good to see you after a while.
It has been a little while, but yeah, lovely to reconnect. Thanks for taking the time out your busy schedule to kind of do this recording with us. Really excited about the content that we're hopefully about to unpack. I believe you're in India at the moment, is that right?
I am in Bangalore, and it wasn't a planned trip, so it just happened. But it's a good trip.
Yeah. Are you there for a while or short trip?
It's a short trip, so I'm getting back home on the weekend.
Okay. How's it been? Has it been a productive time so far?
It's been busy, but it's been productive. Yes.
Great to hear it. Great to hear it. Okay. So look, the kind of the overarching theme today, and I'll dig into like the reasons why you and I are talking, but it's all around the title of what should growth GTM look like in the new world. New world, obviously, we're talking about 2024 and all the kind of changing dynamics, I think, in our space. But I think, out of my network, I really tried to seek out some thought leaders in this space and people that can really add value to our mutual audience. And I'm speaking to lots of people that are struggling to kind of understand and navigate what this kind of growth and the levers and the metrics that are important in today's market, I think, candidly. So yeah, let's obviously in a minute we'll jump into all of that. But for people that haven't tuned in before, my name's Simon Gregory. I'm a director of Thornton Gregory Recruitment Company that focuses on MarTech companies and software companies. I guess the premise of these episodes is to try and bring in thought leaders and people that I've got to know and respect and built a relationship with over the last 10 years and kind of give back a little bit more to the community about some of these topics. I really thought last summer that over the years, I've met some great people, some amazing minds that have built fantastic businesses retrospectively. And if I can tap into some of those little nuggets and, unpack a few of those little insights that can help people out there kind of navigate the kind of choppy waters we're in at the moment, then it's obviously a win-win for everybody. So what we've tried to do is try to look at obviously interesting topics like we're going to cover today, but also look at pillars within businesses. So obviously revenue leadership. I've done a couple of pretty cool episodes around sales enablement and RevOps, customer success and professional services, which is very important in my mind. And also we're doing some cool stuff soon around channel and alliance and the changing art of the pre-sales and solutions consulting business. So I guess as we kind of fly into 2024, I hate to say it, but when I'm having these conversations, I'm feeling there is a little bit of kind of cautious optimism about 2024. And I'm having a lot of these sort of conversations with people like Supratim. There's no doubt around it that 2023 was kind of a painful year on a lot of levels. And it was a bit of I use the word sort of balancing year from 21 and 22, where there was lots of growth and maybe in some people's eyes too much growth. I wanted to, in my research to these episodes, I try and give a little bit of data around the reasons why this is important. And the lifeblood of a lot of the companies that Supratim has spent his career in, and also I work with, is all around and attached to the VC and private equity community and money that feeds into that market. And I read quite interestingly that the startups in Europe and Israel secured 53.4 billion euros, around 50 or 60 billion dollars, let's say, across nearly 9,000 rounds as of December 5th, 2023, according to PitchBook. That was compared to last year, the deal value fell by 48.9%. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's just sort of setting the scene. The hard reality is that even just in the short time of 2024, there's over 153,000 employees in the US that have been let go, and that's up from 93,000 across the whole of 2022. So there's obviously some changes afoot, and that's led by economic climate, potentially overhiring, as we talked about, and the rise of AI. But as founders, CEOs, and leaders focus on different metrics and push towards profitability, as we're going to talk about. This is a whole reason why I brought Supratim on today. So that kind of sets the scene a little bit. But yeah, super excited to have you, Soups, or Supratim. Soups maybe to some people, but he's held some amazing roles as CRO, most recently at a property tech high growth business called Wired, but also where we met and managed. I had the fortunate nature of doing some work with you guys as CRO of CleverTap, which you held for 3 and a bit years, and also after that, Data Camp, also a super cool company. Raising money, especially at CleverTap, with Sequoia and Tiger Capital and Excel. So you've got a great understanding about what good growth looks like, both as an advisor to companies and also obviously as a revenue leader. Okay, so within that in mind, and that's the big drum roll and the big kind of landing pad there. But I hope we can add some real depth and value to the conversation today. Okay, so I guess without further ado, I said that was going to be 3 minutes and it was 6, so sorry. But without further ado, should we jump into some of these questions?
Let's do it.
Great. Okay, cool. So look, for people that don't know, I know I touched upon it a little bit there, but for people that don't know, you've got an awesome background. Can you share with the listeners just a little bit about that and your story?
100%. So for people who don't know me, I'm a mechanical engineer by education and a self-learned computer programmer by choice. That's in the early stages of my career. That's how I got into technology. I realized very quickly, very early in my career, that is, I was not a great programmer. In today's world, you talk about these 10x programmers. I wasn't one of those. And frankly, I loved to solve problems for customers, which led me to, product management initially and ultimately to sales and revenue growth, which is where I really flourished. I figured I enjoyed selling and working out growth puzzles. And, that's where I settled. So I was an enterprise sales guy, carrying a quota, crushing it for a fair period in my career, becoming a sales leader, becoming a sort of sales and marketing leader and a P&L owner. And that's been the trajectory in my career. And I'm glad I found the go-to-market track because that's what naturally aligned with my personality and my interests.
That's really cool. Some of the people I speak to, actually, they have that kind of technical grounding. You said about programming. Do you think that's kind of set you up in your early years in those conversations?
I think, I wouldn't generalize it, Simon. I don't want to say that if you haven't done it, you wouldn't be successful. But in my case, it just helped me understand the value creation drivers a little bit. So it was useful for me. But it's definitely not a single formula. I just appreciated the total value chain a lot more because I kind of came from engineering and technology and ultimately went to go to market. And perhaps I'm more biased to that whole value chain experience for that reason alone.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, in terms of that career that you've kind of gone through and that personal growth, yeah, and professional growth, can you share some of the key milestones that took you into that sort of sales leadership and revenue leadership position?
Yeah, if I have to break my career up, like in chunks of years, I was an engineer between 1995 and 2000. Um, I became a product manager, program manager, sort of pre-sales person between 2000 and 2005, and ultimately became a full-time sort of sales and marketing person from 2005 onwards, and head of growth CRO since 2012 onwards. So I'd say like the revenue leadership, the full gamut of revenue leadership encompassing sales, marketing, customer success, sort of revenue ops. I've been doing that for about a decade now. And of course, the roles change, the scope of it has changed, the underlying technologies have changed, and but that's basically been my career.
Hugely exciting time, though, I guess, to be involved in, the kind of embryonic stages of SaaS and seeing it to where it's grown today. Um, I know nobody chooses when they have their career, but it must be fascinating to look in the rearview mirror and see where it's got to, and where it's come from, I guess. Okay, and like in terms of, we talked to some of the guests. Some people have pretty career defining moments and mentors. I think that's what we're trying to get into as well. Um, have you had any during your career, the early stage, that have really helped you in your career development? And if so, like who are they and why?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have had great mentors. I think it is, it's people who've taken a bet on you. Like I told you, I was an engineer, and not everyone, despite all the talent that they may have possess, is going to become a salesperson from being an engineer. Someone's got to make a bet for you to do well in a completely different function or a domain that you haven't really proved your chops as yet. So yes, there's some people who took great um, who took bets on me. One of the guys one of my very first bosses, who was also a mentor of mine, a guy called Steve Elfman. I used to. This is in the late '90s, early 2000s. Who kind of gave me breaks without really seeing proven chops, if I may say. He gave me breaks on the back of whatever he saw, perhaps potential. And I'm grateful for it, because if he didn't give me the break, I wouldn't ever be where I am. And I don't want to pretend that I'm incredibly successful or whatever, but I love what I do now, and I wouldn't have gotten that break without Steve. And then there were people after that who gave me breaks as well. But Steve was probably the first guy, and that I met. You have to be lucky in your career, Simon. Like anyone who says that only ability is going to take them through to wherever they are probably being slightly disingenuous. I think I greatly believe in being helped by people, and I try to help people in return, because there are people who help me realize some part of my potential, and I like to do the same. So yeah, mentors have played a great role in my career. The other thing I'll say is serendipity. I've always tried to build relationships with a wide group of people, not always thinking about benefits or what is this going to give me, but serendipity has a way of giving back in ways that you can't predict. And I think there are many of those people who have opened doors, who have helped me learn things in small ways but in very profound ways. And I can't name all of those without really being sort of you know doing, because I wouldn't be doing justice to people who I would forget in the process. But I'd like to say that I have many people who have had disproportionate impact on me. Um, in despite the fact that we haven't spent a lot of time together, but I value their relationship, and I do everything to build on those relationships and those types of relationships going forwards as well.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there's no getting around human to human connection, is there, in our market or any market? People buy from people, and it's not always needs to be an equal value exchange. And it doesn't cost you anything just to be a nice person at the end of the day, does it? So I totally agree with that in all walks of life. So it's good. I mean, do you think that Steve, have you always had that innately in you, or did Steve really open your eyes to that value?
No, I think I knew I wanted to get there, but he gave me the opportunity. I feel like, Simon, there are lots of people who have a clear idea of where they want to go, but sometimes you need that first opportunity. You need someone who will who will take that bet on you. And Steve took that bet on me, and that unlocked a whole lot of opportunities and value creation for both the for companies that I was part of as well as for me. So that's why I think those are, that's what leadership is all about. Leadership is about unlocking value, um, unlocking company value, financial value, people value, technical value, all kinds of things. It's about placing bets in places where the value hasn't is not very clear. Anyone can place a bet where value is clear. I could buy stocks in Microsoft today, and no one's going to call me a genius for doing that. But if I was betting on a company that's yet unknown but is going to become the next Microsoft, that's where true talent lies, I feel.
Yeah, yeah, and it's understanding the levers, as we say, that make that a high potential and high, great opportunity to put your bets within. Okay, that's cool. I totally agree. Look, as alluded to at the top of the call there, setting the scene around the current state of the SaaS market, it's clear that VC money and private equity money either isn't cheap, they've got to give away a huge amount of dilution of the companies if they are going through rounds, and ultimately quotas are not being hit, just candidly. Certainly on the quotas that were set coming out of 22, I'm trying to get the years right. They've had to have some corrections around that. So look, how do you see personally the 2024 market ahead of us?
So I think 2024, Simon, is a year of reset. And let me preface that statement with some background. You know, between 2008 and 2023, or most of 23, we lived in a world of zero interest rates and free money, if you will. Capital was literally easy to come by for most of this period. That's a pretty long sort of decade and a half, and a lot of companies were born in this period or flourished in this period, and they haven't known anything other than that regime. I think 2024 is a year of reset in the sense that um, every technology business, and we are talking about technology businesses here, I believe, has to go back to basics. And one of the very basics is, what value do I provide for the price that I charge? So there's going to be some level of price value realignment that's going to happen in every business, because customers are incredibly value conscious. you know it may come I don't believe they're just cost conscious. Cost conscious means they're going to buy an inferior product for a cheaper price, but that's not what customers want. Customers want fair value for the right value, if that makes sense. So I think there's going to be price value realignment. I also think that every company, whether you're an early stage company or a late stage company or a mid stage company, you have to figure out a way to be lean and build a team that's high performing. You're not going to be able to carry a bench of people who are not contributing to value. Like, productivity is going to be a real thing. It's not just going to be some it's fancy metric or a vanity metric that you show to your investors. you know Revenue per employee, all those things are going to be real, because it really impacts your bottom line. So I think you got to build a team of doers, and you got to build a really high, a really sort of a team of doers, and you got to be, but you also have to be lean. You can't carry fat. And finally, I think, if I had to boil it down to three things, I think you have to rethink go to market. And that includes sales, marketing, customer success. But in my mind, you have to rethink marketing and sales. Marketing, probably most of all, because you're not going to be able to acquire customers in the same way that you did before. You're not going to be able to spend a lot of money on the usual channels that you did and suddenly expect growth to explode. I don't think that's going to happen. First of all, it's not going to be viable, because it's just going to be disproportionately expensive. But B, because some of the efficiencies of the traditional channels are questionable in the world that we talk about. So I think you've got to think about different ways of building a relationship with an audience, building a relationship with your customers, building a community of stakeholders, And I think those are things that's going to change. So it's going to be a year of reset, and not just a real year of reset, by talking about it, by actually changing the way you operate.
Do you think it's not a completely new way of thinking for these founders, but it's certainly a much tighter focus on that kind of lean and mean, like community building you talked about there, engaging the value exchange. So it's just making sure that people maybe with slightly lesser resources, more stringent bank balance, more eyes on the bank balance, maybe I should say. So it's just making sure that they're really focused on those points. Interesting. Okay, cool. And you touched upon a little bit there, but like, what's your definition of like good growth? Yeah, I hear that topic or make people talking about doing more with less, but like, what's your definition of good growth? That would be really interesting.
That's a great question, Simon, because I think I think before 2023, good growth was top line growth. If you could grow your top line at 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100%, that was great. If you're a direct to consumer company, you had to grow 2x year on year, or probably even 3x year on year. And it didn't matter how much it cost you to get that growth, but it was okay. Even if you were a B2B company, I think you really needed to focus on high growth, like 70, 80 percent growth year on year. I think good growth in the current world, in the current model, kind of boils down to really efficient growth. And efficient growth is you have to balance profitability with top line growth. So it's no point growing 100% year on year if you're going to run out of cash in 6 months. And if you can't raise money, if you're going to die in 6 months and grow 100% year on year because you can't raise capital, that's not good growth. So good growth now is balancing growth and profitability, I'd say. And there are various metrics to kind of to track that. We can talk about it later on. But I think it's that balance that's really important. In the previous period, in the previous regime, just growing your top line. I know of companies, or many companies, not just companies I have been attached with, companies that I invested in, companies that I've advised, companies where my friends worked at, where if you could grow top line growth by 80, 90, 100%, everything was possible. You could go and raise the next round. You could do it at a positive valuation, and you could continue to, follow the same sort of drum roll.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I guess that leads into the next piece, which was just around. So, what's your perspective on the difference between profitable growth, which is obviously what we're looking at in the horizon, I guess, what we need to be, and then the kind of thing that I'm seeing banded around LinkedIn, which is obviously the stuff in the rearview mirror, which is all around growth at all costs. Like you mentioned about runway and burn rate, but I mean, clearly that's the lifeblood of every startup. But why is that so important today?
It's important today because fundamentally capital is expensive. It's not as cheap as it was 18 months back, and capital is not unlimited, which means you will it's hard to raise capital. So you have to really you need to prove two things. You need to prove that you can grow, but you also need to prove that you can generate free cash flow or become profitable in the foreseeable future. So I think, what efficient growth means, growth at all costs means growing top line. If I can grow my top line at 100% and some other company can do it at 200%, that company is the winner. I am not. It doesn't matter what my bottom line looks like. In the current world, I think the company that grows at 80% but is able to create, but has a path to profitability in the shortest period, is more favorable than the company that grows at 100% but has no path to profitability. And the way to measure that in a lot of companies, particularly in SaaS companies, they have this metric called the rule of 40, which is a combination of your growth rate and your margins, right? Your profitability. And if you kind of add those two things up, if it's above 40, then you're sort of healthy. That's the notional metric, I think. And what that proves is that, if you grow significantly and you have slightly lower profitability metric, that's okay as long as it's over 40. If you grow slightly lesser but you're more efficient on your bottom line and you still get above 40, that's also good. So that's why I like the rule of 40, because it's a balance of both those things. You can flex on any of those levers, but you need to hit a threshold, if that makes sense.
And is that something that within your advisory work you try and teach founders about this? I've heard that before, the rule of 40. I never really knew exactly what it meant. But is that like a very well-known thing amongst other CROs and startup peers?
I think it is fairly well known, Simon. But I will say this to you: in many companies, I have been either advising or I have come in as an operator. I haven't seen that being operationalized effectively. So there's one thing saying I know it, there's another thing saying I've implemented it. And I haven't seen that being done very effectively elsewhere. But if you do it, then you can't lie to yourself. Because if you're not hitting the rule of 40, then you've got to question what's going on. And you might make a conscious decision. Like you are a high growth business, you're growing at 100%, and you lose your profitability is like minus 40, minus 60%. So 100 minus 60 is 40. You're still kind of hitting the rule of 40. And there you're betting on the fact that your growth so much, you can continue to grow at 100%. And so you can continue to burn at you continue to operate at minus 40%. And probably some investors still going to invest in you because, they see you have a large TAM, you figured out your growth, your go-to-market channels, and you can continue to grow at 100%. But if that's not true, then you have to focus on your bottom line, right? So the long answer to your exact question is, I think it's a known metric, but it's not been operationalized nearly as effectively as I'd like to. And I think it needs to be operationalized across the board if you have to survive.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's something like that that's holding these people accountable, I think, as you say. Yeah, they draw a line in the sand and say that's where we need to be. No, that's really interesting. So you've been in this space you've been in software for a good amount of time, MarTech as well. So you've been in the market where there's been somewhat peaks and troughs, but how do you see companies navigating out of, troubled waters of 2023 and obviously into 2024? Like, how do you see that?
So you read some stats out at the top of the call, Simon, and I'd just like to add to that. So funding's dropped, like you mentioned. The other thing that happened in 2023, and I think that's a trend that will continue in 2024, is many more startups shut down in 2023 than ever before in the last 5 years. Yeah, and I think that's what we are talking about. That's why we are talking about efficient growth, profitable growth, changing your ways, focusing on efficiency, on all of those things, right? So when I've seen these cycles before, and I've seen at least 2 or 3 of these cycles before, like major cycles, I think the people who succeed are the people and leaders who recognize that the regime has changed. And they adapt to that new regime, not just in lip service, but through actual change, actionable change. And the people who do that, everything that we're talking about, Simon, is not rocket science. This is all that, these are changes in habits, these are changes in operating models. But I think a lot of the founders and executives who are running growth startups today have never seen a cycle like this before. And so, but the ones who are intelligent and who are smart are making the change. They're going to come out of this stronger, by the way. I believe that they're going to come out of this stronger. They're going to face a period of transition, which is going to be painful because everyone's going to take some cost out. That's happening across the board. But I think people are going to survive, are going to come out stronger. But if you are not going to be able to make changes quickly, and you're not going to be able to make changes deliberately, you're going to suffer. So I think this is the time for wartime leaders. Wartime leaders don't sit on their chair and expect things to get better. Wartime leaders seize control. They become micromanagers. They get involved, and not everyone likes wartime leaders, but they have a function. In wartime, you don't leave anything to chance. Similarly, in times like this, you don't leave anything to chance. You take control. Speed is king. People who make changes quickly are going to create an extra 6 months of runway. That's going to be the difference between life and death, right? They're going to attract those kinds of people who are going to change the course of the company. They're going to pivot faster, whatever it means. So I think, having seen those cycles before, I don't think there's anything new this time. There are no new technical skills that's required to navigate this. I think it's all of those things are leadership skills and actually sort of basic human trait. You got to act fast. You got to be deliberate. You got to recognize this change is permanent. It's not not transitory. This is not going to go away in 6 months. In 6 months, the world's not going to go back to 2021, and money is not going to be free again, and you can't go back to the old ways of doing things. Yeah, and the people who recognize those are making those changes, are going to survive, are going to come out stronger, are going to build a $1 billion, $1 trillion company. And I think you're going to see all of that, but you're also going to see people who can't do that, and they're going to die.
Yeah. Very telling, isn't it? People that procrastinate and the effect that has on their business and the future of their business. So you said it from a position of being there and done that, maybe. But you're also, maybe as a side project, but I believe you're also an investor within the space. And as I said at the top of the call, I believe quite well connected within the VC and private equity community. Given that is such an important part to, maybe I'm saying this from a biased position, within my world, recruitment, and the growth that comes off the back of that, I would love to know what the sentiment is from the people that you've spoken to, and maybe what the next 3, 6, 12, 18, 24 months looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you my personal view, and I'm not making a prediction about the future, but I'm just trying to project what I'm hearing and the data that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
I am cautiously optimistic about the future. I think there's some great technologies that's unfolding at the moment. I mean, everyone's talking about AI, but AI comes in different flavors, and AI is not the only thing. There's other things as well. So I'm very optimistic about the future. But I think there is going to be, the future's fraught with change. So there's going to be a lot of disruption. And disruption always is slightly painful because it has winners and losers. Winners and losers are, so we're going to see winners and losers in this cycle as well. But my bet is, Simon, you're gonna, the next $1 trillion company has already been founded. We just don't know of it. Those things are being built by some founder that we are probably not talking a lot about, but we'll be talking a lot about those people in 6, 12, 18 months time. So I think periods like this is a great time to build. Periods like this thing are a great time for investors to put their bets on new horses. Um, and I feel the same. I feel as an investor, this is a really good time if you have a 10, 15-year horizon to really place smart bets and make a lot of money. But if you're trying to kind of make a lot of money in 1 or 2 years time, then I don't know what to do. I'm not very well equipped to give any advice there. But I will tell you, in the cycle of technological changes that I have seen before and I'm seeing now, particularly with AI, I do think that the future looks very bright. I think there's going to be a lot of disruption in terms of um, the usual way of doing things is going to be replaced by new ways. I'm sure there's going to be some job displacement, but new jobs are going to be created. But I do think it's going to be net positive for society. I think it's going to be net positive for wealth creation. I think it's going to be net positive from a productivity perspective. So I'm very optimistic about it.
Great to hear it. Great to hear it. That's what I wanted to hear. And in terms of the characteristics, so if we go back to when you built companies and teams, cross-functional teams, revenue teams, whatever you want to call them, are there any sort of key characteristics that you look for when building those teams? And maybe second part to that question, has that changed if you were to build a team today?
That's a great question. I think hiring is, particularly in startups, at every stage of a startup, hiring is so important. In early stages, it is incredibly important, but it continues to be important even in the growth stages. Um, I sort of look at three things, Simon, in every role that I look for, whether it's sales, marketing, or customer success. These are the places, revenue ops. These are the places that I hire a lot of people. I don't hire engineers, that much. Um, so I look at skills. the, do you have the skills to do the job that you need to do? You need some skills like technical skills. uh, mm, you need, if you're a salesperson, you need to know how, you need to have some basic skills in prospecting. You need to have some basic skills in selling and convincing people, in negotiating. You need to have some basic skills. So skills is one thing that I look at. Knowledge is something that I look at as well. Knowledge is all about how much do you know about the space that you're trying to get into. You don't need to be an expert, but do you know enough? Are you curious enough? I think curiosity is very important. You do not have to be an expert, but if you're curious, you're going to find insights that other people are not going to find. You're going to spot opportunities that other people are not going to find. You're going to notice dislocations, which are going to be opportunities for you. And the final thing, which I place a lot of value on, Simon, is what I call qualities. These are inherent qualities that an individual has. Yeah, loyalty, integrity, resourcefulness. These are things that's hard to teach. But these are things that really, really are important for startups, because in startups you can't afford to have one-dimensional people. You can't afford to have an expert who knows only one thing. A startup is the success of a startup is based on having people who have some portability, having people who can do more than one thing, and that's where I think quality is so important. Not just because they can be portable, but also because a startup changes every 6 months. So the skills that you need today may be different from the skills that you need tomorrow. But if you have those qualities, if you have adaptability, if you have loyalty, you've got integrity, you've got resourcefulness, if you have learnability, if you're coachable, if those things are true, then you're going to be relevant in every stage. So I kind of look at skills, knowledge, and quality. And of the three buckets, I rate quality above everything else. So if I find a candidate who's equal in skills and knowledge, but one guy is 2x quality than the other guy, it's that guy that I'm going to hire every day.
And is that like a conscious thing that you're doing when you're interviewing them, or is it just something that you kind of navigate, like, and maybe look back on retrospectively after the interview, or is it like a kind of like, are you going through a criteria, even like kind of subconsciously?
I try to sort of codify that in the interview process. So where it's easy to say that you're going to hire a resourceful guy, but how do you test for resourcefulness? So you need to really codify that in your interview process. You need to have questions that you need to have exercises, whatever your process is. But no, it is a conscious thing for me, and for the teams that I build, I try to codify that in the recruitment process, in the hiring panel, and I try to get a diverse point of view from other people, not just me, about how they thought about someone else on the quality side of things as well, and then we make a decision. But yeah, it is definitely a conscious decision. It's not a look back and say, hey, it worked because these guys were resourceful. I know that's true, which is why I want to make that a part of the criteria for hiring.
Yeah, cool. That's great insight. Thanks, Sue. It's amazing stuff there. Um, Metrics, we touched upon like some of the acronyms in the space, but I guess for people that are listening to this episode, like, what are the actual metrics that are important for a company to scale in the current market, and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer, Simon, not because the metrics are hard, but there are some general metrics. But you need to make sure that you're measuring what's right for your business. If you're a B2C business, some of the metrics that you're looking at is not exactly the same as your B2B business. But even if you're a B2B business, depends on the type of go-to-market motion that you have, and you're going to kind of devise your metrics accordingly. Like, but some of the general metrics that I like to look at, first of all, as a principle, I like to look at metrics through the funnel. So I want to look at top of the funnel metrics and bottom of the funnel metric and the middle of the funnel metric. So I definitely want to look at cost of acquisition. How much does it take you to acquire a customer? However you measure it, but it needs to be properly defined. You need to understand what it takes you to acquire a customer. Okay. I want to know what is the lifetime value of your customer. So if once you've acquired a customer, how much revenue is that customer going to deliver to you, and that's important, because if you acquire a customer for $1 and your customer gives you $10, your CAC to LTV allows you to do certain things that you wouldn't be able to do if you acquire a customer for $1 but your LTV is only $3, for example. So you need to know what your lifetime value for a customer is, what your cost of acquisition is. I like to measure those. I also like to measure other things in the funnel. For example, what is the not just what the cost of acquisition is, but for a customer, but what is the cost of conversion is from lead to customer. You know, Lead acquisition cost is not the same as acquisition cost for a customer, but lead to customer acquisition cost, the conversion rates are important. I also like to measure things like retention rates, and how much what your gross retention rates are, what your net retention rates are, what your sales and marketing efficiency is. We can go into a whole lot of details here, but I think it is really important to measure the whole funnel, like I said, and the efficiency of the funnel at every stage, so that you can make right decisions about what channels you're spending in, what programs are you spending in, uh, and that's going to make sure that you ultimately build an efficient machine, and you're spending on the right channels.
Great stuff. Okay, and then I mean that leads us quite nicely into, you talked about NRR. We've spoken about that in a few different episodes, and the role that plays in today in SaaS and the importance of that. But if we come back from NRR, I think it's all about customer success. So how does customer success play a pivotal role in your role as a CRO?
Oh, massive. Particularly in a SaaS business, Simon, I say your job's only started after you've sold, because the promise of SaaS is a customer's going to be around for a very long time. If a customer's going to be around for only 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, that's not worth it. the promise of SaaS is a customer is going to be around for years. So customer success is really important in making sure that the value that the customer bought your product for is delivered as quickly as possible. There is enough evidence to say that our customers are going to churn away if time to value is very long. If they don't see value in a short period of time, and short is different in different sort of for different product categories. But if you haven't seen value in 2 years' time, you're certainly not going to be around, even for the most complex product. So NRR is that metric that enables you to understand at an aggregate level how much are your current customers contributing to your overall growth. How much of your growth is going to, if you have an NRR of 120%, it just means that your current customer base delivered 120% of revenue, right, in the next year. So you know that your existing customers are contributing to growth, right? And so I think NRR is a very healthy proxy metric to understand at an aggregate level if your current customers are buying your product or expanding your product as much as you'd want to. But even if your aggregate NRR is good, you then need to kind of break it into segments and understand how each customer category is doing. So the long answer to your short question is NRR is a great overall metric, but you've got to micro segment it to understand how each customer segment is doing, because averages often hide nuances for certain customer categories, and you need to understand that.
So it's just in terms of the constant conversation that we have with other people and other leaders is about remote, hybrid, and office culture that's obviously been kind of sprung upon us based on COVID-19. What's your view on the model that you run in your companies and best practice?
I think we're going through a transition, Simon. I don't think we don't know the final answer. So, of course, with COVID, everyone's compelled to go 100% hybrid. You didn't have any other option. And then after COVID, some companies are trying to bring back employees for some of the time, all of the time. It just depends by company and industry. The one thing I can say is hybrid is here to stay. Uh, but what form of hybrid is here to stay, we don't know that quite as well yet. I think every company right now is experimenting with different forms of hybrid, and ultimately we'll see models evolving, which is the right combination of people, process, and technology. So, for example, I can already say that in the businesses that I've been in, I see that you know some things can be done very well remotely, but not everything can be done well remotely. For example, if you have new salespeople, onboarding new salespeople remotely is a lot of problem. You can teach them all you need, but unless you get that passive learning from the other successful salesperson who's kind of taking calls, having hallway conversations, it's really hard. um, you know so I do think there are these models are going to evolve, and ultimately there's going to be a balance of remote and in person. I do believe in person has its value. It has intangible value, and ultimately it's going to be borne out in terms of employee productivity metrics. You know, and so the final word has not been written yet. But in some cases, like engineers, a lot of engineering can be done remotely. I mean, programmers can be anywhere and everywhere. They don't need to necessarily be in the office. They probably need to assemble together for reviews and stuff like that once in every quarter. And so maybe that's the model that's going to be true for engineering teams going forward. But if you're a startup sales team, that model's not going to work. You're going to have to be in the office 3 or 4 times a week, because you need to learn from each other, and the pace of learning is going to be determining how successful you are. So I don't think it's a one size fits all. I don't think it's 100% remote that's going to work. I don't think, but I also don't think it's 100% physical. I think it's a combination of both those things.
Sorry, just my headphones just clicked out there. You're just saying it's not one size fits all, Soup. Sorry, can you just finish that sentence?
I think it's not a one size fits all. So you got to find the right balance by the company, and it depends on the type of company and the stage of the company. Like startups would need much more in person collaboration than established companies that have established processes and well laid out tools and technologies. It's just a reality, and you've got to adapt. If you try to follow the Google process in a startup that's 1 year old, you're going to fail.
Yeah. I think that you touched upon there the onboarding piece, which I think is the reason why I brought on a couple of guests that are in the sales enablement and RevOps kind of discipline. I think that's a fascinating part of the space that we're in. That's really been disrupted with products, processes, and people, right? That are evolving into amazing attributes for not just MarTech companies, but for software companies in general in this hybrid remote world.
Yeah.
The fastest route to productivity around the onboarding is such a valuable tool for companies to get right or wrong. And as you say, if it's wrong, you churn or you're churning people. You're having to rehire, incurring costs. It's a big burn on different businesses. So it's such an important thing to get right. So it's great you raised that. I guess for any new, so look, I mean, this is all about the community, as I said at the top of the call, but for any new sales or revenue leader in the market that's watching this episode, like if you could give them some little nuggets of advice, what would that be? And also second part to that question is around this kind of ever learning situation. Like, are there communities, events or resources that you would kind of point people to that could accelerate their own personal learning and professional development?
Yeah, I think, Simon, what I'll say is, and this may sound a little cliched,
Go for it.
we live in a world that's changing very fast, and the only thing um, that's going to keep you relevant and and differentiate you is your ability to learn and adapt. So I think all of us, you, me, and everyone around us, no matter whether you're at the beginning of your career, the middle of your career, or probably at the later stage of your career, yeah, you have to be a learning machine. You have to constantly and consciously uh, learn, because you're not going to be able to encash just your experience. You have to learn new stuff. And the other thing I'll say is, I like the idea, and I learned about it, and I implemented it at various points. I like the idea of a personal board of advisors. um, and what I mean by personal board of advisors is, you know who you are. You have, if you're self-aware, you're gonna have a personal board of advisors who are going to help you on different things that you need help with. But you need that trusted group. Sometimes it's hard to find that singular mentor who's going to be a one call, one stop shop for all things that you need, from you know your mental anxieties to the functional problems that you're facing. So maybe the idea of a personal board of advisors, where you select the group, and it can't be 15 people. It has to be sort of a manageable number, 2 or 3 people. But that's what I do. I have a personal board of advisors, and there are people that I go for. There are people that I go for general advice, people who have life experience, people who I respect a lot about their intuition, their general sort of approach to life, and I go to them for problems that I'm facing. Then I'd go to people for technical problems that I'm facing. If I've got a sales or marketing problem and someone's going to solve that, in a really pragmatic way, you decide what your personal board of advisors is. But there are two things I'll say: um, continue to learn, be a learning machine, and consciously learn and measure your own learning. And I'll say, if you do that, you will see that your progress is going to be correlated positively to how much you're learning. And when you stop learning, you're going to start stagnating, frankly.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great way to end the questions. I think that's why some of these communities, from a third party kind of agency perspective and connected to different people like I am, the boom of things like, I think they used to be called the Revenue Collective, but there's like Pavilion and Pre-Sales Collective, where they have that kind of just like platform and foundation where everybody can knowledge share. Nobody's in it for anything but trying to help others. I mean, I'm sure there is a financial model that supports it, but it is just surrounding yourself with good people. There's a lot to be said for that, not just in professional life, but in your personal life as well, probably, if we're going to get a bit deep about it. But look, Supratim, that was absolutely awesome, and so much in there that I mean, some of those questions were like sprawling in terms of the amount of depth you could have got into. So thank you for giving us a little soundbite at times. But just to kind of finish the episode, because I'm conscious we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I've just got just a little bit of fun. So I've got a few little quick fire questions just for people, again, that don't really know you, just to get to know you a little bit better on a kind of personal level. But so I want the question that comes into your mind straight away. No umming and ahhing, please. Okay. So, drum roll. Right. Favorite piece of tech or app you are using now?
Favorite piece of tech or app? Notion.
Okay, cool. iOS or Android?
iOS.
Okay, cool. Night at the disco or night at the restaurant?
Restaurant these days.
Okay, cool. Favorite food?
Italian.
Okay, cool. Favorite movie?
A Beautiful Mind.
Okay. Favorite place that you visited on holiday or just generally visited in your life?
Favorite place?
Favorite place.
I think Lisbon's my favorite place.
I've heard such amazing things. Yeah, everybody says raves about it. I've never been. It's on the to-do list for sure. What's your guilty pleasure, if you have one?
An old-fashioned cocktail.
Okay, good man. Okay. If you had one superpower, what would it be and why?
Read your mind.
Okay, cool. Last but not least, I always caveat this because health and safety is the most important thing. But God forbid, a house is burning down and you've got one personal item that you're able to save. What is it and why?
My wife.
Good. Because you had to pause for a second. Okay, cool. Well, look, Supes, that's great fun. And thanks for being one of our guests today. Again, amazing content. Look, if anybody wants to get in touch with you about anything we've discussed today, what's the best way to do that?
You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. You can also get in touch with me on Twitter. My LinkedIn's got I believe it's got my phone number as well, so you can WhatsApp me.
Okay, cool. Well, when this goes live, what we'll do is we'll tag you in the post, and you and I will talk about the best ways that people can either get in touch with you by email or directly through LinkedIn. Yeah. But look, thanks again. Really appreciate your time, especially when you're so far overseas. And hope the rest of your trip is great and safe journey home. Okay.
Thank you, Simon. It was a great pleasure.
Great.